We're live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Phil Mattingly in Washington, D.C. Jim Acosta is off today. The January 6th committee could get the chance to question an unexpected witness, Steve Bannon. Yes, the same Steve Bannon who is facing a criminal contempt trial for openly defying a congressional subpoena is now willing to testify at a public hearing. The former Trump advisor's reversal follows express permission from the former president himself. In a letter to Bannon, Trump writes, quote, "I watched how unfairly you and others have been treated, having to spend vast amounts of money on legal fees. I will waive executive privilege for you, which allows you to go in and testify truthfully and fairly." Side note, Steve Bannon wasn't working in the White House at the time. Committee member Adam Kinzinger today saying the committee is open to Bannon's testimony as long as it's under oath.
I think what you're seeing for sure by comments like that and anybody else is they went from initially saying that this committee was nothing but, a sideshow, something that nobody was interested in, to all of a sudden, oh yeah, I want to testify publicly in front of it.
Now, Kinzinger also confirmed another major piece of the investigation, saying that former White House counsel Pat Cipollone did not contradict testimony from former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson, who provided explosive details from the final days of the Trump administration. And the House Committee's investigation is not the only one zeroing in on Trump and his inner circle. CNN's Sarah Murray has the latest.
In battleground states across the country, GOP activists, Republican Party chairs, and even a state Senate president.
I am the Senate president of Arizona, and it is our job to make sure we have fair and accurate elections.
Are getting hit with subpoenas. As this week, some Republicans tied to the plan to put forward fake electors for Donald Trump are set to turn over information to federal investigators, sources tell CNN.
If they have something they think is a crime, they'll bring an indictment, and that's when you'll find out what they're doing.
The Justice Department's investigation into January 6th began with the violence that erupted at the U.S. Capitol and charges against more than 800 alleged rioters, including the leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. But in recent months, it's expanded to cover the fake elector scheme in 7 battleground states, with subpoenas to prominent Republicans like Arizona Senate President Karen Fann, Georgia Republican Party Chairman David Schaefer, and Arizona Republican Party Chair Kelly Ward.
Do not let this election be stolen.
The probe also inching closer to Trump as investigators raided Jeffrey Clark's home, the former DOJ official who pushed Donald Trump's voter fraud claims.
They even brought along something, Tucker, I've never seen before or heard of, a electronic sniffing dog. And they took all of the electronics from my house.
And also seized electronics from former Trump election attorney John Eastman, who peddled baseless fraud claims and pushed a legal theory that Vice President Pence could block the 2020 election certification.
All we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock, he let the legislatures of the state look into this.
Beyond the DOJ probe, a separate criminal investigation into Trump and his allies is escalating in Georgia, where investigators subpoenaed key Trump allies, including Rudy Giuliani and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. The district attorney there says more subpoenas may soon be headed to Trump's inner circle.
We're going to do our due diligence.
And a separate congressional investigation unearthing new details, like Trump's eagerness to go to the Capitol January 6th. And the legal risks that went with it.
Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
Going to the Capitol.
Those revelations increasing Trump's criminal exposure and raising the odds he could face repercussions.
Thanks to Sarah Murray for that report. Let's bring in 2 CNN political commentators, Republican strategist Alice Stewart and former Clinton White House press secretary Joe Lockhart. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. Alice, I want to start with you. If Republicans take back the House in the midterm elections, it seems pretty close to a certainty at this point, that is, without question spells the end to the Select Committee. But it's very clearly not the end of Justice Department investigations, the investigation down in Georgia. I guess the big question now, particularly based on what we've seen the last several months, does this issue go away just because Republicans control the House? Or is this something that carries over into potentially 2024?
Look, the issue in terms of the House Select Committee, that will clearly go away, and they won't continue to look at that. The question is, what does the DOJ do? What have they seen and heard, and what are they learning and investigating that could potentially lead to criminal charges? That's the big question. But what we're seeing in terms of voters, the cake is pretty much baked. Those that were frustrated and angry with the insurrection are going to continue to be frustrated and angry. A lot of Republicans, specifically Trump's base and the ultra MAGA base, they look at this as nothing to see here, nothing to do here with regard to holding people accountable, and they're focusing more on the policy issues in terms of midterm elections, the economy, jobs, and crime. So I think in terms of the midterm election, Republicans are going to be more motivated by policy issues and not looking back at past grievances having to do with election integrity, election fraud, and what happened on January 6th.
Well, those also aren't very beneficial issues for Republicans to be talking about based on everything we've seen in the hearing. Joe, as much as it pains me to say this, 2024 speculation is already in high gear. President Biden's poll numbers are at their lowest point right now. Trump's scheme, fraudulent scheme to overturn the 2020 election is obviously very much in the news. It seems like these types of things have members of both parties looking to some degree for alternatives. They should look no farther than their TV screens, according to a new Politico op-ed, which argues that Fox's far-right star Tucker Carlson could take the GOP nomination if he wants it, and that Democrats should answer that with Jon Stewart. Stewart has said, no way he'll run. I think his tweet was, no thank you. But Joe, this speaks to a larger question. Is Joe Biden right now, at this moment, given his poll numbers, given the turbulence, the top choice for Democrats in 2024?
I think he's under pressure from his own base because there are things that the base are very angry about, abortion being probably the #1 issue, that he has limited power to impact. I think when it comes down to whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump in 2024, or Joe Biden versus Ron DeSantis in 2024, these issues are going to be much more important, and people will be looking past any one issue and looking at the manner the men and women that are running in the race. I would also say that there's a long history of people from entertainment being in politics. You know, a couple of months ago, everyone raved about President Zelensky's skills in bringing the message of Ukraine to the world. And he's a former comedian. So politics, and American politics is no exception, have seen entertainers be very effective politicians.
I don't know if I can just follow up on that. I think there's a lot of GOP fundraisers and donors that would love nothing more than to have Tucker Carlson run for president in 2024 as a Republican. But because he is able to connect, he certainly has the top-rated talk show. But look, Tucker Carlson's pretty fed up with the Republican Party. He doesn't feel as though the party represents Republican voters. He clearly does, because people tune in, they listen to him, he connects with them. But I don't see him doing so. He has indicated in an interview that he doesn't strive for the power or to control people, rather to inform and educate them. So Tucker Carlson for 2024 is a good talking point. I don't see him ever doing that, certainly as a Republican.
Yeah, he denied it last week.
Yep.
I feel like we have bursts of these every single cycle. Joe, I want to ask you about what I think was one of the most interesting developments of the last 48 hours. And that's related to the White House strategy when it comes to criticism for the left. They've obviously been under searing criticism, extensive pressure in the wake of the Supreme Court decision and based on their reaction. But in a Washington Post story, the White House communications director put out this statement saying Joe Biden's goal in responding to Dobbs is not to satisfy some activists who have been consistently out of step with the mainstream of the Democratic Party. It's to deliver help to women who are in danger and assemble a broad-based coalition to defend a woman's right to choose now, just as he assembled such a coalition to win during the 2020 campaign. This was a whoa moment to me when I read it, because the administration has been so reticent to go down that path, despite regular conversations with frontline Democrats asking them to take this kind of stand. Do you feel like this is a good strategy, and is this a turning point for the administration in terms of how they deal with their own party?
Well, I think this is a turning point for Democrats, and it is the big wild card in American politics right now, which is just what does overturning Roe v. Wade mean as far as Election Day? It is a wild card in 2022. You said earlier that it's almost a fait accompli that Republicans will take Congress. I don't think we know that, because I don't think we've had this sort of seismic political change in this country since maybe the 1960s and 1970s. So it is something that the president and Democrats have to be united in putting this front and center. And I think you saw that over the last 3 or 4 days with the executive orders. But again, there's still frustration that he can't just sign a piece of paper and say this goes away. And until he, or you can't pack the Supreme Court. And so there'll be frustration for a while.
Yeah, but there's no question. That was an up-and-in, high fastball brushback pitch from Kate Bedingfield, and I know progressives have been very frustrated by it, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I want to ask, when it comes to the Republican Party, Trump's influence in the Republican Party hasn't waned much, if at all, since he left office. But Adam Kinzinger said something that kind of caught my ear in the sense that will eventually change. Take a listen.
What does history say in 5 or 10 years? Because I can guarantee, well, I can get about as close as I can to guaranteeing that in about 10 years, there's not going to have been a single Trump supporter that exists anywhere in the country. It's like Nixon. There were a lot of people that supported Nixon until he was out of office, and then everybody was like, oh, nobody supported Nixon. I figure that that's going to happen.
I feel like November 2016 should stop everyone from guaranteeing anything ever to some degree,
Right.
but do you agree with that assessment that the party will not be tethered to the former president 5 or 10 years from now?
I truly believe so. I certainly hope so, because with him, we lost the House, the Senate, and the White House. And look, politics is a game of addition. We cannot just rely on Trump's base and the MAGA base. We have to add to that, and we have not done so. And it's also a game of numbers. And right now, we're seeing numbers, financial numbers, people like Ron DeSantis raising millions of dollars because he provides an alternative to Trump, the conservative values without the chaos. And Republicans realize we need to have someone that represents the policies without the personality conflicts that Trump brought to the table, and they're looking at options. There are people out there that can bring the policies that we had under the Trump administration without all the chaos, and they realize we can't just win the primary, we have to win the general, and doing so by finding someone that's a lot less toxic.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people looking at it. It's worth noting, it's early.
Right.
I know it is early. So much is going to happen over the course of the next 2 years. Alice Stewart, Joe Lockhart, thanks guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, coming up, the famous sequoias in Yosemite National Park now under threat as a growing wildfire ravages the area. Firefighters now using sprinklers to try and save them. But first, a quick programming note. Make sure to tune in tonight and join CNN as we explore the diverse land, marine, and wildlife of Patagonia's desert coast. Patagonia, Life on the Edge of the World, premieres tonight at 9 p.m. on CNN. Here's a preview.
This is Patagonia. See this land of extremes like never before. Where animals and humans, once enemies, now fight together against new challenges. What does it take to live in one of the most wild and isolated places on Earth? Patagonia, Life on the Edge of the World, premieres tonight at 9 on CNN.
Traveling through memories of my life, learning something new each and every time. On my way, trying to get it right. On
Capital A Malaysian conglomerate best known for its low-cost airline, AirAsia, is going big on a new tech venture, a super app. The platform lets you reserve flights and hotels, as well as book rideshare and deliver food.
The idea for a super app is to become the center of the ecosystem. 80% of business revenue is still generated out of travel, and that gives us a very powerful positioning of our app today.
Growth plans for AirAsia's super app include Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and Singapore. But the company has entered a market filled with steep competition. Southeast Asia is home to big-name super apps like Singapore-based Grab and Indonesia's GoTo Group.
I think one of the biggest point of difference of AirAsia Super App versus many other competitors out there is we own the infrastructure.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief.
No nonsense.
How stupid do you think we are?
Because getting to the truth matters. Aaron Burnett Out Front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
This is a really important story. My name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN.
Assalamu alaikum.
Day in, day out, you see the reality of people living through this.
Ничего страшного.
Okay.
This is the front line.
On a human level, you find courage, sacrifice. This is what life is about.
A lot of people are wondering why.
You see the worst of humanity.
Putin might use a nuclear weapon. Absolutely terrifying.
But you also see the best of humanity. My job is to be present.
The human cost is right here.
And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing.
I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine.
This
is CNN.
I'm Nick Watt in Los Angeles, and this is CNN.
A wildfire burning in Yosemite National Park has now doubled in size in just the last 24 hours. The Washburn fire threatens the world-famous giant sequoia trees at Yosemite, some believed to be more than 2,000 years old. Now, earlier today, fire crews set up these sprinklers to protect the grizzly giant, the second largest sequoia in the national park. It's 209 feet tall. CNN's Chad Myers is tracking the conditions firefighters are facing on the ground and joins us now with a closer look at this very dangerous fire season.
It is going to be another day out there with temperatures above 100 degrees, low humidity, and a little bit of wind. These firefighters are getting no break whatsoever. Now this fire is almost 1,600 acres and growing quite rapidly. It is very hot. All the stresses put on the firefighters, all of the dead trees in the area also burning the underbrush here. Look at the Fresno will be 107 tomorrow. A little bit higher in the mountains will maybe go 103, but try to be fighting a fire at that type of temperature. There's the rainfall off to the east, the monsoon coming into Arizona and New Mexico over the next couple days, but certainly no rain for California. 61 major fires in 9 separate states. But here's the number that we need to focus on. 4.6 million, almost 4.7 million acres burned already in 2022. Now the average for this date over the last 10 years is 2.2 million. We are double the number of acres that have already burned across the country, and that's including Alaska, because there are also some major destructive fires burning in Alaska right now. No end in sight to this fire season.
Those numbers are unbelievable. If you don't see what's happening, you're not paying attention. Chad Myers, thank you so much. Now, a short time ago at the WNBA All-Star Game, a stirring tribute to Brittany Griner, the Phoenix Mercury star who has been detained in Russia since February. Griner was announced as an honorary starter before the game, and players and coaches wore shirts with her name. Griner's wife, Sherelle, described the moment.
It's always going to be difficult being around basketball without my wife being present, but I use these moments as just gratitude for her legacy and impact, you know, that even in her absence, you know, you can't not say Brittney Griner. So I'm just so grateful that everybody in this arena is actually still remembering my wife, even without her being here.
Now, sources tell CNN that in the coming weeks, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson will travel to Moscow to discuss the release of Griner and former Marine Paul Whelan. Coming up next, take a look at this image. You are looking at one of the deepest images of the universe ever taken. That's real. That's a real photo. Multiple stars and galaxies, all captured by NASA's Deep Space Telescope. Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson joins me live next to discuss.
We've missed the globe-trotting and adventures, and we're longing to get out and go.
This is living.
Uncovering a city's DNA, meeting people who will share its secrets.
I love being here.
And making discoveries that wow.
You've got to be joking. Nice here, isn't it?
It's a world of wonder. Now, go and see it. Saturday on CNN, in association with Turkish Airlines.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
I'm Nick Robertson in London, and this is CNN.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels, connected to your world.
We're here at the home of one of the FSB team. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
What do you want the world to know? People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their stories. I'm Hadas Gold in Jerusalem, and this is CNN.
Scientists and space enthusiasts all over the world are eagerly awaiting the reveal of the very first images from NASA's James Webb Telescope. Now, those who have gotten a sneak peek say the high-resolution images are like nothing they've ever witnessed and will change the way we see the universe. CNN's Kristen Fisher has the details.
And liftoff. 6 months after the most powerful telescope ever made launched into space,
Control Center for
the team inside the Webb Space Telescope's flight control room is preparing to reveal what astronomers all over the world have been waiting for decades. The telescope's first full-color images, which are expected to be light years more impressive than the test images released last month, and will include the deepest image of our universe that's ever been taken.
Our view of the universe is definitely going to change on July 12th.
Ken Sembach runs the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore, Maryland, home to Webb's mission control, and he predicts the day that Webb's first images are released will be on par with the day that Galileo became the first person to ever point a telescope to the sky.
There'll be a universe we knew before Webb and a universe we know after Webb. I really mean that. I think our perspective will change.
NASA says some of the images released on July 12th still need to be taken. Others have already been captured and are being kept secret. But NASA's leadership has gotten a sneak peek.
What I have seen just moved me as a scientist, as an engineer, and as a human being.
A sense of awe and frankly got emotional.
But getting emotional about the telescope is something Lee Feinberg has learned to bury after working on Webb for more than 2 decades. The telescope's most recent brush with death took place just a few weeks ago when a micrometeoroid struck one of the telescope's massive golden mirrors, which are critical for its operation.
Earlier in my career, it might have been a punch in the gut, but what I've learned about working on a big project like this is things are never as bad as they first seem or never as good as they first seem.
He was right. The telescope survived the strike, and NASA is now on the verge of handing this $10 billion telescope over to the scientists whose research proposals have been selected for the first year of observations.
It is just doing as well as we could have ever hoped, if not better. And so I think the scientists are just going to be extremely happy to use it. And we're going to be excited to see what gets, what comes out of it.
Kristen Fisher, CNN, Baltimore.
Joining us now is astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. He is the co-author of Welcome to the Universe in 3D, a visual tour. Neil, thanks so much for joining us. Look, I want to be honest with you straight out of the gate. I am not an astrophysicist, nor could I ever have been. But this new telescope is being described as so powerful it can peer back into the origins of the universe. So given my preface, what does that mean?
Well, by the way, you said you're not an astrophysicist. Neither are most people. Astrophysicists are barely 1 in a million people in the world. So don't feel bad, first of all.
Thanks. Thank you.
One of the fun facts about cosmic discovery is that the results of what we do in telescopes and laboratories and the like are very accessible to the public. As a minimum, they show up in science fiction films, but otherwise people talk about it at the water cooler the next morning. And yes, this telescope is exquisitely tuned to observe galaxies forming at the origin of the universe. And those galaxies, if people didn't otherwise know, those galaxies are very intensely radiating ultraviolet light, and in some cases X-rays. And so, but this telescope is not tuned for ultraviolet because over the 13.5 billion years that the light has been traveling, the universe has been expanding. And that expansion of the universe has stretched the wavelength of the light and transformed it from ultraviolet into infrared. It's longer wavelength light. So this is a telescope that's capturing light as it comes to us, not as it was first emitted. And so that's part of the brilliance of and the concept of how and why this telescope works and why we expect it to basically transform our understanding of the universe.
You know, one of the things, this was an extensive project over, I think, 3 decades, billions of dollars. The expectations being set by those who have seen these photos in detail up to this point are very high. We live in a moment where things rarely meet expectations that are that high. You think this will meet those expectations without any question?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I just want to congratulate my colleagues who have indeed been working on this for decades. You're going to see some final results or some recent, there were engineers that have been trying to figure out how to get this telescope to work as intended, and a whole other set of people to get it funded. So it's a hugely collaborative effort. And to have it just reach fruition and come on the precipice of the release of the actual scientific data, I mean, I'm on the edge of my seat as well. So the way you need to think about this is the telescope. I left something out, excuse me. Because it's sensitive to the infrared, infrared has a capacity to penetrate deep into very dense gas clouds that exist within galaxies. And what goes on inside of gas clouds? Stars are being born. Planets are being born. So this telescope has the power to see deep inside of stellar nurseries, to see the newest parts of the universe being born, as well as the oldest. So it's quite the 1-2 punch there.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm actually surprisingly following this. I apologize, my face looks like I'm not. I swear to God, I'm following what you're saying. I want to bring up the teaser picture that was released again, because, you know, again, as somebody who doesn't do this for a living, I see shiny object, and I'm interested by it, and I'm always interested by these types of photos, and I think everybody is. But when you look at the teaser photo, when you've seen the teaser photo, what are you seeing in that? Oh, yeah, sorry. So to get back to your earlier question, seeing that teaser photo, oh my gosh! I'm saying, if that's the engineering photo to test that things are focused and are aligned and are working, I can't wait the 48 hours until they release the astronomical scientific imagery. And that image, by the way, you see the spiky objects. Those are stars in our own galaxy sitting in front of our noses, and they're very bright, and they have to try to block it out. And those spikes are because of the structure of the telescope itself. They're not really the universe. The light, as it moves around what's called the secondary mirror, is held up with this spider structure, and light diffracts around that structure and gives you what they call diffraction spikes. So ignore those. Those are stars sitting in front of our nose. Every other smudge, every other object in that image is an entire galaxy, most of which are on the ranks of our Milky Way galaxy, it's self-containing hundreds of billions of stars. So, and this is just some random part of the sky, right? We didn't say, hey, there's an interesting spot, let's look there. No, this is like, we're going to expect just that kind of result no matter where we look. And so, yes, this is some good stuff coming down from space. Now, everybody listening, remember, the thing that immediately draws your eyes, the spikes, ignore that, is basically the advice we're getting at this point in time. So I do want to ask you about something related to this, a little bit off topic. Elon Musk made some headlines in the last 24 hours. I'm not going to ask you about your definition of material adverse effect in the Twitter deal, I promise. But I do want to ask you about his long-stated position, which he reiterated, according to Reuters and Bloomberg, in Sun Valley, about colonizing Mars. He tweeted a couple days ago, humanity will reach Mars in your lifetime. Drudge Report flashing this headline, let's talk about Mars, with a picture of Musk after he reportedly spent much of his speech in Sun Valley talking about it. So I guess you've pushed back on this with a fairly rational argument that I've read in the past, which is people probably don't want to live in Mars or on Mars. But when you look at the technology like we're seeing with Webb and the ability for people to really create extraordinary things when given the time and financing, when are we going to be able to put somebody on Mars, and will Musk be the one to do it?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, we are already on Mars with rovers, many generations of rover. We now get high-resolution images, remote controlled from Earth, on Mars, which at any given moment could be 50 or 100 million miles from Earth. So we have a human presence on Mars through our robotic emissaries. So just first think about it that way. Of course, Elon wants to put people on Mars, and you gotta have to want to do that. But, no, it takes more than just wanting to do that. Somebody has to pay for it. Okay, it's expensive to send people to Mars because usually they want to come back. You got to feed them along the way. We can't run on solar power the way a rover can, and so it's a whole other objective to accomplish that than just sending a robot. So the question is, can that happen? I can tell you that Antarctica is balmier and wetter than any place on Mars, and nobody's lining up to build condos in Antarctica. Okay, so I don't know until we terraform Mars. Then sign me up. Turn Mars into Earth, then I'm all in. But we're still victims of our own forces of nature on Earth. We run away from hurricanes and tornadoes, and we're victims of earthquakes. To terraform is to control the forces of your planet in a way so that they do what you want them to do. And we're not really there yet. So I'm all for the ambition of wanting to colonize Mars. I just think it's not as close in time as people are imagining.
I like that you caveated that people usually want to come back when they go to these planets. That I would agree, I would think. Neil deGrasse Tyson, this is going to be a huge week. Tuesday is really exciting. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective. I really appreciate it.
Very happy to be with you.
All right, and make sure to check out Neil's book, Welcome to the Universe in 3D, a visual tour. We'll be right back.
The world is changing, the industry's changing, the windows are changing, things going to streaming are changing. And I think if you're a company that just sits around and says, I'm going to do things the same way I've done them for the past 20 years, you're going to be left in the dust. So IMAX has been looking to move into other areas. We did a live stream with Kanye and Drake, and that was really successful. People dancing in the theaters. We also, in a related way, did a deal with Disney Plus, where we're now on that service.
We have front row seats.
And for a number of the big Marvel titles, you could see them with IMAX aspect ratio. So the core movie business is doing extremely well. I think we have to lead the way to a transition to the new world and look at new ways of doing things.
It's 9 o'clock in the morning at the University of Dayton.
How is everyone? What we're going to do this morning.
Tony Talbot is teaching a class about slavery.
There's over 40 million human trafficking victims in the world today.
But his students aren't just learning the facts about human trafficking. They're being trained to teach others about it, students who are even younger than they are.
We get the students to become near peer educators, going into classrooms, giving human trafficking awareness presentations. If we tell children about this now, they can become part of the solution.
Hi guys, my name is Ami. I'm a second-year student at the University of Dayton.
Today, Talbot students are taking over Nick Pent's 9th grade American history class at the Dayton Regional STEM School.
It's definitely important to know what is trafficking, because maybe you're in that situation and you don't even know that you're being trafficked.
A lot more online trafficking is happening, and I didn't really realize that before, but now that we do, you can obviously use more precautions when you're online.
I'm hoping that my students, now that they're knowledgeable, hopefully they get a little bit passionate about it, become leaders. I'm telling you, you just gotta step aside and let the next generation do its thing.
Thank you.
These troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessments. Do you now regret that?
It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
Quiet and, quote, totally normal. That's how former colleagues describe the man who police say admits to shooting and killing Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. New details are emerging about the 41-year-old suspect who shot Abe while he was giving a campaign speech on Friday. Police say he used a homemade weapon, but the suspect tells police he initially wanted to use explosives. CNN's Blake Essig joins us live from Tokyo. And Blake, what else are we learning right now about this suspect?
Well, totally normal, quiet, and mild-mannered. Phil, not exactly the characteristics that would come to mind to describe a man who was determined to assassinate the former prime minister. But according to NHK, Japan's public broadcaster, the 41-year-old suspect considered carrying out the crime a day earlier at a separate campaign event, but decided against it because he was looking for a space that was less guarded. In the end, Abe was shot twice from several yards away while delivering a speech in the city of Nara in support of ruling party candidates ahead of yesterday's upper house election. NHK reports that the suspect targeted Abe because he held a grudge against a group that he believed Abe had ties to and was linked to his mother. Now, CNN has contacted local police, but they wouldn't name or provide any information on this group. It's important to note that the man suspected of murdering former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe hasn't yet been formally charged. On Sunday afternoon, local time, TV cameras did catch a glimpse of him when he was moved from a police station in Nara, a city about 230 miles west of Tokyo, where the assassination took place, to the district prosecutor's office. Now, as you mentioned, Phil, the suspect told police he originally planned to kill Abe using explosives before deciding to use a homemade gun. NHK citing police say that they found explosives and several other homemade guns at the 41-year-old suspect's home. These guns, including the one used to kill former Prime Minister Abe, were made with iron pipe barrels and wrapped with duct tape. Some of these guns had 2, 3, and even 6 barrels. Now, in the days that have followed, many questions have been raised about the former Prime Minister's security. The chief of police in the prefecture where Abe was assassinated says that he can't deny that there were problems and that he takes responsibility for the failures that led to Abe's killing, Phil.
Yeah, still a lot of unanswered questions. Blake Essig, great reporting as always. Thanks so much. And I'm joined now by Tobias Harris. He's a senior fellow for Asia at the Center for American Progress and author of the book, The Iconoclast, Shinzo Abe and the New Japan. Tobias, Blake mentioned the upper house elections that happened yesterday. They're landing mostly where we expected in terms of Abe's party. The Liberal Democrats are doing quite well. But it's less about how the election landed and more about how the party itself is still very much pushing forward on, I think, what Abe's legacy was or his primary issues when he was prime minister. Obviously, still a prominent member of the party. Is that your sense of things, that the party itself, even if Abe is gone, is still very much an image of what Abe brought to the table?
I think that's exactly how to think about it. Shinzo Abe, certainly at the moment of his death, was probably still the most powerful figure in the party even 2 years after resigning. He was the head of the party's largest faction. We know the LDP is dominated, or has been for a long time, by its factions. He, of course, being a statesman, gave him, I think, a massive presence in domestic media and also international media, of course, so he had an ability to indicate what Japan's policy should be and basically indicate what he wanted the government to do and force the government to listen to him. And of course, he also, I think, was also the head of what you might say the largest ideological bloc within the party, which is different than the faction. So he had a tremendous amount of power to shape the direction that the Kishida government might go. And also, I think Kishida was personally dependent on him to win last year and was aware of that. And so it was definitely going to be a factor after this upper house election.
You wrote in an op-ed for the New York Times, you had as a journalist, you were always looking for the perfect lead quote to capture what you're writing about. And your lead quote, which was a quote from the Prime Minister in his first time, I believe his first term as Prime Minister, which was, "My mission is none other than to draw a new vision of a nation that can withstand the raging waves for the next 50 to 100 years," which I don't think anything encapsulates more what he did, particularly his 8 years the second time around. What did he do to prepare Japan for those waves that he is referencing there?
Well, I think you look at the whole arc of his career. You're going back, early 1990s as a young Diet member. You're trying to figure out what he was going to do. And he had an idea that Japan had to have a stronger leadership, stronger government, stronger top-down leadership. For a long time during the Cold War, Japan had a lot of, it was basically government by interest groups. The Prime Minister was basically first among equals who couldn't actually set a direction. You had strict civilian control of the military. The military was, limited in what it could do. And from very early on in his career, his goal was that the civilian government needs to be stronger. We need to have a proper national security establishment that can play a role defending Japan in the world and also contribute to our alliance with the United States. And we need to make sure that politicians are able to say what they want to do and actually follow through on it. And that was really, I think, the guiding threads of his entire career. And you look at every step of the way, these were the things he was pushing at. And it was clear in 2006 when he became Prime Minister the first time, this is what he wanted. After his wilderness period, he came back, he thought a little bit more, refined what he wanted. But fundamentally, it was the same goals and the same things he pursued during his almost 8 years during the second government.
You mentioned the relationship with the U.S. Obviously, you don't want to view everything about a major foreign leader through the lens of the U.S., but we are in the U.S. But I've been so fascinated. I covered him when I was covering President Obama, covered him with President Trump, and obviously the current president, Biden, worked with him as vice president as well. What's your sense right now for people here who are wondering what it means broadly about the relationship between Japan and the U.S.? President Biden said it's stable, it will remain stable. I think it's certainly been put in a much better and stronger place from the former prime minister. But what does this mean going forward for the relationship?
Well, I think Abe, as prime minister, particularly during his second tenure, realized there is no alternative to the alliance with the United States for Japan's security. That as a country with long-term demographic future is problematic. Its economy has been stagnant and is trying to find a way out of that. Japan can't face a country with China's strength alone. That it needed the U.S. committed to Japan's security, to the region's security, and to the region's actually economic development as well. I mean, that was always something that he was interested in pursuing. And every one of his successors is going to follow that playbook now. I mean, no one, I think, wants to countenance the alternatives. The idea of Japan somehow trying to defend itself alone or even step into the United States' shoes. I think they recognize, that you need, a democratic superpower. Of course, we're also interested in India as a democratic superpower, but the United States brings so much to the table, is respected as a military power, as an economic power, and Abe knew there was no alternative to making sure that the U.S. Was present in the region, and I think his successors will absolutely follow the same course.
Well, and so many of the issues that he was raising his hand on and saying this is going to become a problem, it's why we need to pursue this, have very much come to fruition. It's still stunning when you look at the region right now. The U.S. now uses the free and open Indo-Pacific, which was framing that he kind of started with, the Quad. He was the driving force behind that. Internationally, he was a very, very major player. Tobias Harris, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, if you want to learn more about Shinzo Abe's life and legacy, do be sure to check out Tobias's book, The Iconoclast, Shinzo Abe in the New Japan. Now, coming up, a rare brain-eating amoeba forcing Iowa to close a popular lake beach. That's next. You're live in the CNN Newsroom.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for a market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
This Chinese national treasure is more endangered than the panda. Its lichen-covered forest home at risk. In the high-altitude woodlands of southwest China's Yunnan province, the Yunnan golden monkeys, or black snub-nosed monkeys, are fighting for survival. Almost 100 monkeys are killed by hunters every year in the region, according to the Nature Conservancy.
Villagers rely on mountains. In the old days, they would often climb up the mountains for hunting and other activities such as gathering and cutting trees.
But as part of a forest monitoring campaign, Xu Hao trains local villagers to patrol the monkey's habitat and look for old wire traps.
This is the wire trap. Villagers tie it to the tree and use this to catch some animals.
His team has installed over 100 infrared cameras in the forest to monitor the monkeys, and golden monkey populations in the region are finally increasing, says Li Peng.
This monkey is one of the only kind of animals living in this high altitude. So the existence of this species is kind of important and critical to the whole world.
This is the work that continues. Who we are today and what we can become.
This is journalism that reflects the world we live in.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
New today, a lake beach in Iowa is temporarily closed after a swimmer was hospitalized with a rare brain-eating amoeba. Doctors found the microscopic amoeba in the Missouri resident after he swam recently in that lake. And public health officials say the amoeba can cause a life-threatening brain infection. The amoeba is commonly found in lakes, rivers, and ponds and can infect people when contaminated water enters the body through the nose. Health officials say this type of infection is incredibly rare. Since 1962, there have only been 154 cases in the U.S. Now, this week's CNN hero, Bobby Wilson, is using his retirement and savings to support those in underserved communities.
We have turned 5 acres of land right here in the heart of the city into a green oasis that really impacts the quality of life of people that lives around here and visit with us. Till it back into most of the people in this neighborhood don't have